The Seattle rain hammered against the office windows as I stared at the company-wide email that had just landed in my inbox. Annual Corporate Athletics Day mandatory participation for all departments. My stomach dropped faster than the stock prices we've been tracking all week. I'm Ben, and I work as a junior analyst at Morrison Financial Group, a mid-sized investment firm downtown. At 26, I should probably be more confident, but 3 years of sitting behind a desk analyzing market trends hadn't exactly prepared me for athletic competition. My daily exercise routine consisted of walking to the coffee machine and occasionally taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Did you see the email? My cubicle neighbor, Jessica, peered over the partition. Her enthusiasm was infectious, but right now it felt more like a virus I didn't want to catch. Yeah, I saw it. I scrolled through the details. Track and field events, team relays, and something called a company championship run that would determine the overall winner. This should be interesting. Mr. Garrett, our department head, emerged from his corner office like a shark sensing blood in the water. At 52, he maintained the build of someone who still believed he was the high school quarterback he'd been 30 years ago. His gray suit was tailored perfectly, and his smile had that predatory quality that made junior employees like me nervous. Thompson. He called out, using my last name like we were in some military operation. You excited for Athletics Day? Sure, Mr. Garrett. Should be fun. I tried to match his energy, but my voice cracked slightly. Fun. He chuckled, and several other colleagues looked up from their screens. Ben, with all due respect, I've seen you struggle to carry a box of files to the archive room. Are you sure you're ready for actual athletics? The office grew quiet. That uncomfortable silence that happens when someone crosses the line from friendly teasing into something sharper. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I'll do my best, I managed to say. Well, just remember, Garrett continued, his voice loud enough for half the floor to hear, this isn't about participation trophies. This is about representing our department with excellence. We can't have anyone tripping over themselves out there. The reference hit like a punch to the gut. 3 months ago, during a client presentation, I'd stumbled while walking to the projector. It wasn't dramatic, just a small trip over the power cord, but Garrett had made it into office legend. Thompson's Great Tumble, he called it, bringing it up whenever he wanted to remind everyone that I wasn't quite management material. That evening, I sat in my small Capitol Hill apartment, staring at my reflection in the black window. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere out there, my colleagues were probably preparing for Athletics Day with confidence I couldn't imagine having. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Lucy, who lived in Portland. How was work today? Same old, I typed back, then deleted it. Instead, I wrote, got voluntold for a company sports day. Should be a disaster. Maybe it'll surprise you, came her quick reply. Remember when you thought you'd fail calculus but ended up with a B+? Lucy always had this way of finding silver linings, but this felt different. This wasn't about studying harder or putting in extra hours at my desk. This was about physical capability, about proving myself in an arena where spreadsheets and analytical thinking meant nothing. I walked to my small kitchen and made a sandwich, thinking about tomorrow's training announcement meeting. Garrett had scheduled it for first thing in the morning, probably to maximize the awkwardness of discussing my inevitable failure in front of everyone. The next morning arrived with typical Seattle gloom. I dressed in my standard office uniform. Navy slacks, white shirt, and the tie my mom had given me for my birthday. As I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, I practiced looking confident in the polished steel doors. All right, everyone, Garrett announced once we gathered in the conference room. Athletics Day is in 3 weeks. I want to talk strategy. He pulled up a presentation on the smart board. Here are the events: 100-meter dash, relay races, obstacle course, and the main event, the 5K Company Championship. Points are awarded for placement in each event, and the department with the most points wins the Golden Trophy and a bonus day off. Golden Trophy. A bonus day off. Suddenly this felt more serious than a casual company picnic. Now, Garrett continued, clicking to the next slide, I've already signed up our strongest performers for the key events. Jessica, you're handling the 100-meter dash. Rodriguez from accounting suggested the relay team. And for the 5K, his eyes scanned the room and landed on me with what I can only describe as malicious glee. Ben, I think this is your chance to shine. The room was silent again. The 5K. 3.1 miles of running. I hadn't run a continuous mile since high school PE, and that was 8 years ago. Mr. Garrett, I started carefully, maybe someone else would be better suited for the distance event? Nonsense. He stood up, pacing in front of the presentation screen. This is about stepping up, Ben. About pushing beyond our comfort zones. Besides, he paused for effect, how hard can it be? You just put one foot in front of the other. Try not to trip. A few people chuckled. Jessica looked uncomfortable. Rodriguez studied his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. After the meeting, I found myself standing in the office supply closet, ostensibly looking for printer paper but really just trying to process what had just happened. 3 weeks to train for a 5K when my current cardio routine consisted of climbing 2 flights of stairs and feeling winded. Ben? Jessica's voice came from behind me. You okay? I turned around, probably looking as overwhelmed as I felt. Yeah, just processing. Garrett was out of line in there, she said quietly. The way he talks to you isn't right. It's fine. He's not wrong though. I'm not exactly athlete material. Maybe not yet, Jessica said, but you've got 3 weeks. That's enough time to surprise people. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled beginner 5K training plan. The results were overwhelming. Couch to 5K programs, interval training, pace calculators, running shoes guides. It was like discovering a whole world that existed parallel to my spreadsheet reality. I found myself reading about something called the Couch to 5K program, a 9-week plan designed to take complete beginners from sedentary to running a full 5K. The problem was I only had 3 weeks. The program started simple. Alternate between walking and jogging for 20 minutes. Day 1 was supposed to be a warm-up walk, then alternate between 60 seconds of jogging and 90 seconds of walking, repeated 8 times. 60 seconds of jogging. How hard could that be? That evening, I drove to Green Lake, a popular running spot about 10 minutes from my apartment. The 3-mile loop around the lake was exactly what I needed, and the path was well-maintained and relatively flat. As I parked my car, I watched serious runners glide past with effortless strides, their breathing steady and controlled. I'd bought basic running shoes during my lunch break. Nothing fancy, just something from the department store that looked like what runners wore. I'd also grabbed athletic shorts and a moisture-wicking shirt that the salesperson had recommended. Standing at the edge of the path, I started my phone's timer app and began walking. The 5-minute warm-up felt good. The late afternoon air was crisp, and the lake reflected the cloudy sky like a gray mirror. Other people were out, families with strollers, couples walking dogs, and those intimidating runners who made it look effortless. Then my phone buzzed. Time to start jogging. I began what I thought was a light jog. Within 30 seconds, my breathing became labored. By 45 seconds, my legs felt heavy and my chest was burning. When the timer hit 60 seconds, I gratefully slowed to a walk, gasping for air like I'd just sprinted up a mountain. 90 seconds of walking recovery felt like nothing. Then the timer buzzed again. By the 4th interval, I was seriously questioning my life choices. By the 8th and final interval, I was walking more than jogging, my face was bright red, and I was pretty sure I was going to die right there beside Green Lake. I completed the workout technically, but it was humbling in a way I wasn't prepared for. As I walked back to my car, legs shaking slightly, I passed a woman who had to be at least 60 years old jogging steadily past me, her breathing controlled and her pace consistent. 3 weeks suddenly felt like no time at all. That night, I sat on my couch with an ice pack on my shins, researching everything I could about rapid running improvement. The internet was full of conflicting advice. Some articles said you needed months to build a proper running base, others claimed you could see significant improvements in just a few weeks with dedicated training. I created a training schedule that was probably too ambitious. 6 days a week, alternating between running and what the websites called cross-training. I had no idea what cross-training really meant, but it sounded important. Day 2 was worse than day 1. Day 3 was when I realized that my legs weren't just sore, they were genuinely angry at me. Every step down the stairs in my apartment building was a small reminder of my decision to become a runner in 3 weeks. But something strange started happening around day 5. The first jogging interval still sucked, but by the 3rd or 4th interval, my breathing had settled into something resembling a rhythm. I wasn't fast and I definitely wasn't graceful, but I was running for entire 60-second stretches without feeling like my lungs were going to explode. A week into my crash training program, I attempted my first continuous mile. It took me 11 minutes and 37 seconds and I had to stop twice to walk, but I finished it. Standing there beside Green Lake, sweaty and exhausted but oddly proud, I realized something important. I was actually doing this. The second week brought new challenges. I increased my running intervals and decreased the walking recovery time. My legs stopped aching constantly, and I started to understand what people meant when they talked about finding your pace. Mine was slow, probably embarrassingly slow by real runner standards, but it was mine. I also started paying attention to the other runners at Green Lake. There was the guy who showed up every day at 5:30 p.m. sharp, wearing the same green shirt and running the loop twice. There was the woman with the golden retriever who ran at exactly my pace but made it look effortless. And there was the group of college students who treated their runs like social events, chatting easily while maintaining a pace that would have killed me. None of them were superhuman. They were just people who had built up their endurance over time. The realization gave me hope. By the end of week 2, I ran my first complete 5K. It took me 28 minutes and 43 seconds, which was slow by any competitive standard, but it was a complete 5K without stopping to walk. I celebrated by buying myself a proper running watch that could track my pace and distance. The night before athletics day, I couldn't sleep. I'd managed to get my 5K time down to 26 minutes and 12 seconds, which still wasn't impressive, but was a huge improvement from where I'd started. More importantly, I knew I could finish the race without embarrassing myself completely. I laid out my running gear, the moisture-wicking shirt that had become my uniform, my broken-in running shoes, and the watch that had become my most trusted companion. Tomorrow, I would either prove that 3 weeks of training could overcome 3 years of office-induced fitness decline, or I would confirm every doubt Garrett had ever expressed about me. Either way, I was ready to find out. 3 weeks can change a person more than you might expect. As I stood in the employee parking lot at 7 a.m. on athletics day, I barely recognized the guy who'd trembled at that first company email. My legs felt strong beneath me, my breathing was calm, and for the first time in months, I wasn't dreading a work-related event. The morning air was crisp, typical for Seattle in late September. Our company had rented Magnuson Park, a sprawling area along Lake Washington with enough space for all the planned events. As employees filtered in from various departments, I could see the natural divisions forming, the confident athletes gravitating toward each other, the reluctant participants huddling in nervous groups, and the spectators who had somehow managed to get assigned to timing and scorekeeping duties. Well, came a familiar voice from behind me. Look who actually showed up. I turned to see Garrett approaching, dressed in what appeared to be a complete Nike outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His shoes looked like they'd never touched pavement, and his athletic wear still had the crisp lines of items fresh from the store. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Good attitude, Ben. That's what I like to see. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn running shoes and simple athletic clothes. Though I have to say, I'm a little worried about putting you in the 5K. It's our department's biggest point opportunity and, well... He shrugged in a way that was supposed to look apologetic but came across as condescending. Maybe we should move you to something safer? The obstacle course has some walking sections. Before I could respond, Jessica appeared at my elbow. Actually, Mr. Garrett, I think Ben's going to surprise you today. Garrett laughed, not unkindly but not kindly either. Jessica, I appreciate your optimism, but let's be realistic here. This is Ben we're talking about. Remember the printer incident last month? The printer incident. I'd gotten my shirt caught in the paper feeder while trying to fix a jam. It had taken 2 people to extract me, and Garrett had found it hilarious enough to bring up in 3 separate meetings. I'm running the 5K, I said quietly. That's what you assigned me, and that's what I'm going to do. Something in my tone must have surprised him because he studied my face for a moment before shrugging again. Your funeral, Thompson. Just remember, when you're walking back to the finish line 20 minutes after everyone else, that I offered you an out. As Garrett walked away to glad hand other department heads, Jessica bumped my shoulder. Don't let him get to you. I've seen you leaving work in running gear. You've been training, haven't you? I had been leaving work in running gear, but not for the reasons she might think. After that first disastrous week of training, I'd started running directly from the office, using the gym's shower facilities before heading home. It was more efficient, and it also meant I couldn't talk myself out of training when I got home and felt tired. A little, I admitted. The morning progressed through various events. I watched Jessica absolutely dominate the 100-meter dash, finishing a full second ahead of anyone else from our department. Rodriguez proved surprisingly agile in the obstacle course, and even managed to trash-talk his way through the relay race. But Garrett was the real show. Despite his expensive gear and confident attitude, it became clear pretty quickly that his athletic prowess existed mainly in his own mind. He finished 4th out of 6 in his sprint, complained loudly about the unfair obstacles in the course, and spent most of the relay race shouting instructions at his teammates from 40 yards behind them. Your boss is quite the character, said a voice beside me. I turned to see Michael Patterson, the head of the accounting department. He was probably in his early 40s, with the lean build of someone who actually used his gym membership. Our departments worked together frequently, but we'd never really talked outside of quarterly budget reviews. "He's definitely confident," I said diplomatically. "That's one word for it." Michael watched as Garrett argued with a volunteer about the proper way to measure his long jump. "I've been doing these corporate athletics events for 8 years now. There's always one executive who thinks buying expensive gear is the same as being in shape." "You've been doing this for 8 years?" "Started when I was younger and stupider," he grinned. "Now I just do it because I actually enjoy running." "You signed up for the 5K, right?" "Yeah." I felt that familiar flutter of nervousness in my stomach. "Good choice. The 5K is where you can really prove yourself. All that other stuff," he gestured toward the obstacle course where someone was currently stuck trying to climb over a wall, "that's just entertainment. But distance running, that's about character. About what you're willing to push through when things get difficult." Before I could ask what he meant by that, the announcement came over the loudspeaker. "All 5K participants, please report to the starting line for final instructions." My heart rate immediately spiked. This was it. The starting line was actually just a painted white line across the park's main path. The 5K route would take us out of the park, along a measured course through the surrounding neighborhood and back. It was a standard out-and-back route, which meant spectators could see the runners coming and going. I looked around at my competition. There were maybe 25 people total, representing all the different departments. Some looked serious, stretching and checking their watches. Others looked about as nervous as I felt. And then there were the few, like Michael Patterson, who looked completely relaxed, like this was just another day. "Runners, welcome to the Morrison Financial Group 5K Championship." The volunteer coordinator was an energetic woman in her 30s who clearly did this sort of thing professionally. "This is a certified 5K course. You'll head out of the park, follow the orange cones through the neighborhood, turn around at the 2.5K marker, and return here to the finish line." She explained the basic rules. Stay on the designated course, no shortcuts, no outside assistance. Points would be awarded based on finishing position, with the winner getting 10 points for their department, second place getting 8 points, and so on. "Any questions?" she asked. Garrett raised his hand. "What's the course record?" 22 minutes and 38 seconds, set last year by someone from the legal department. 22.5 minutes. That was nearly 4 minutes faster than my best training time, which suddenly felt pathetically slow. I tried to push the comparison out of my mind. I wasn't here to set records. I was here to finish respectably and prove that I wasn't the complete disaster Garrett thought I was. "Runners, take your marks." I positioned myself toward the back of the group, which seemed like the safest place for someone of my ability level. Garrett, predictably, had pushed his way to the very front of the pack, right next to Michael Patterson and a few other runners who actually looked like they knew what they were doing. Sat. The energy at the starting line was electric. 25 people, all with their own reasons for being there, all about to find out what 3.1 miles would reveal about who they really were. "Go!" The group surged forward with the enthusiasm typical of inexperienced runners starting a distance race. Way too fast. I held back, letting the pack pull away from me, trusting the training principle I'd read about over and over: start conservatively, finish strong. Within the first quarter mile, the field had already begun to separate. The serious runners, led by Michael Patterson, had settled into a steady, sustainable pace at the front. Behind them, a middle group was starting to realize they'd gone out too fast. And in the back, Garrett was already breathing hard, his expensive running outfit looking less impressive as sweat stains began to appear. I found myself running alone, which was exactly where I wanted to be. My pace felt comfortable, my breathing was controlled, and my legs felt strong. The first mile marker came up faster than expected. "Mile 1, 8 minutes 47 seconds, called out a volunteer. That was faster than I'd ever run a mile, even in training. But it felt sustainable, which was the key. As we left the park and entered the residential neighborhood, I started to catch up with some of the middle pack runners who had clearly started too aggressively. The second mile was where things got interesting. This was the part of the race where fitness mattered more than enthusiasm, where all those training runs around Green Lake would either pay off or prove insufficient. I passed 3 people in the second mile. Not because I was speeding up, but because I was maintaining my pace while they were slowing down. One of them was Henderson from Human Resources, a guy who'd been talking big about his high school track experience all week. Another was Morrison, a woman from marketing who had posted extensively on the company's Slack about her running journey. And the third person I passed was Garrett. I came up behind him gradually, hearing his labored breathing before I could see him. When I drew alongside, He looked over with an expression of complete shock. "Ben," he gasped. "What are you? How are you?" "Just staying consistent," I said, and realized I wasn't even breathing hard enough to make talking difficult. As I pulled ahead of my boss, leaving him behind for the first time in our professional relationship, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about running anymore. This was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than I'd believed. The turnaround point at 2.5K was marked by a volunteer with a clipboard, tracking everyone's position. As I made the turn, I could see the leaders already heading back toward the finish. Michael Patterson was in first, looking comfortable and controlled. Behind him, maybe 30 seconds back, was a woman from the legal department I didn't recognize. But what really surprised me was my own position. I was in 7th place, well ahead of where I'd expected to be, and I felt like I had another gear if I needed it. The return trip was where the real race began. Now I could see exactly who was ahead of me and who was behind me. Now I could start calculating whether it was possible to move up in position, or whether I should focus on just maintaining what I had. I decided to find out what I was really capable of. Mile 3 was when I discovered something I'd never known about myself. I was competitive. Not just willing to finish, not just determined to avoid embarrassment, but actually competitive. I wanted to catch the person ahead of me and then the person ahead of them. I passed the woman from accounting who'd been in 6th place. Her form had deteriorated and she was clearly struggling. As I went by, she managed to gasp out, "Good job," which gave me an unexpected boost of confidence. 5th place was a guy from IT who looked like he ran regularly but had probably started too fast. I caught him with about a mile to go, and he didn't have anything left to respond when I made my move. 4th place was where things got really interesting. The runner ahead of me was someone I recognized but didn't know well, a woman from the investment department who had the lean build of a serious athlete. She was clearly more experienced than me, but she was also clearly hurting. This was going to be a battle. I spent half a mile slowly closing the gap between us. She was fighting to maintain her pace, while I still felt like I had something in reserve. With about half a mile to go, I pulled alongside her. "Strong pace," she said, acknowledging my presence. "Thanks. You too." We ran together for maybe 200 yards, and I realized this was the closest thing to a real race I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just about personal fitness or proving a point to my boss anymore. It was about competition in its purest form. Two people pushing each other to find out what they were truly capable of. Then she made her move, picking up the pace just enough to test whether I could respond. I found out I could. I stayed with her increased pace, and then with about a quarter mile to go, I made my own move. I didn't sprint, didn't abandon the controlled pace that had gotten me this far, but I found another level of effort that I hadn't known existed. I pulled away from her gradually, steadily, and as the finish line came into view, I realized something incredible was happening. Not only was I going to finish strong, not only was I going to place well, but I was actually going to catch the person in 3rd place. The final few hundred yards were a blur of controlled aggression. The runner in 3rd was clearly experienced, clearly talented, but they were also clearly at their limit. I somehow was not. I passed them with maybe 50 yards to go, crossing the finish line in 3rd place overall, with a time that the volunteer announced as 24 minutes and 18 seconds, good for 3rd place. 3rd place. Out of 25 runners. In my first race ever. As I walked through the finish area, trying to catch my breath and process what had just happened, I heard familiar voices approaching. "Ben. Ben, that was incredible." Jessica was practically bouncing with excitement. "You came in 3rd. 3rd place." Behind her, looking somewhat stunned, was Garrett. He was still breathing hard, his expensive outfit now thoroughly soaked with sweat, and his expression was a complicated mix of surprise, confusion, and what might have been the first glimmer of respect I'd ever seen from him. "Thompson," he said when he finally reached me. That was actually pretty impressive." It wasn't quite an apology for 3 years of condescension, but it was acknowledgement that maybe he'd been wrong about me. And right now that felt like enough. Michael Patterson appeared beside us, barely winded despite having won the race. "Nice job, Ben. That was some serious negative splitting. You ran the second half faster than the first half, which is exactly what you want to do in a 5K. "I didn't really plan it that way," I admitted. "I just tried to run smart and see what happened." "That's exactly the right approach. Most people go out too fast and die in the final mile. You paced it perfectly." As the morning wound down and the final scores were tallied, our department had actually placed 2nd overall, largely due to my unexpected 3rd place finish in the 5K. Jessica had won her 100-meter dash, Rodriguez had placed well in the obstacle course, and even Garrett had managed to avoid complete disaster in his events. But the real victory wasn't about departmental rankings or points or trophies. The real victory was the look on Garrett's face when he realized that the employee he'd been dismissing and undermining for 3 years was capable of things he'd never imagined. As I drove home that afternoon, still wearing my participant medal and feeling the pleasant fatigue of genuine physical accomplishment, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Michael Patterson after the race. "You know," he'd said, "you've got real potential as a runner. That was just your first race and you placed third. With some proper training, you could probably break 22 minutes. Break 22 minutes. That would put me close to the course record." 6 months ago, I would have laughed at the suggestion that I could ever be competitive at anything physical. Now it seemed not just possible but inevitable. The kid who'd been afraid to run 60 seconds without stopping had just placed third in a field of 25 experienced adults. The employee who'd been dismissed as clumsy and weak had just outperformed his boss and most of his colleagues. But more importantly, I'd discovered something about myself that I'd never known was there. When pushed to my limits, I didn't break. I got stronger. That realization was going to change everything. Monday morning arrived with a different energy than usual. As I walked through the Morrison Financial Group offices, I noticed something I'd never experienced before. People were looking at me differently. Not with the mixture of pity and dismissal I'd grown accustomed to, but with something that looked almost like respect. "Ben," called out Rodriguez from accounting as I passed his desk. "Man, that was some race on Saturday. Where'd you learn to run like that?" "Just started training a few weeks ago," I said, still not quite used to being the center of positive attention. "A few weeks?" His eyebrows shot up. "Dude, I've been running for 2 years and you smoked me out there." The morning continued like that. Jessica stopped by my cubicle to congratulate me again. Henderson from HR, who I'd passed during the race, gave me a respectful nod. Even people from other departments, people who'd never spoken to me before, were making small talk about athletics day. But the most interesting reaction came from Garrett. He arrived at 9:15, 15 minutes later than usual, walking with the slightly stiff gait of someone whose body was reminding him of Saturday's exertion. As he passed my cubicle on the way to his office, he paused. "Thompson, can I see you for a minute?" This was it. Either he was going to acknowledge what had happened, or he was going to find some way to minimize it. Based on 3 years of experience, I was prepared for the latter. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Motivational posters, a putting green in the corner, and a wall covered with his various certificates and awards. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "So," he began, settling into his own chair with a slight wince. "Saturday was interesting." I waited, not sure how to respond. "I have to admit, Ben, you surprised me out there. I mean, really surprised me." He leaned back, studying my face like he was seeing me for the first time. "Third place. Out of 25 people. That's not beginner's luck, that's genuine talent." "Thank you, sir." "Don't sir me, Ben. After Saturday, I think we can drop some of the formality." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I owe you an apology. I've been dismissive of your capabilities. I made assumptions about what you could and couldn't do, and clearly I was wrong." This was not the conversation I'd expected. In 3 years, I'd never heard Garrett admit he was wrong about anything, let alone apologize to a subordinate. "I appreciate that, Mr. Garrett. The thing is," he continued, "what you did on Saturday shows qualities I haven't been recognizing in your work performance. Dedication, perseverance, the ability to exceed expectations when it matters. Those are exactly the qualities we need more of in this department." He leaned forward, his tone becoming more serious. "I'm putting together a proposal for a new client analytics position. It's a step up from your current role, more responsibility, better compensation. After Saturday, I think you should be the first candidate I consider. A promotion. 3 years of competent but unremarkable work performance had never gotten me close to a promotion, but one 5K race had apparently changed everything." "That sounds like a great opportunity," I said carefully. "Good. I'll have HR put together the formal posting, but consider this a heads up that you're my top choice." He stood up, extending his hand. "Ben, I'm glad I was wrong about you. Really glad." As I walked back to my cubicle, my head was spinning. A promotion, an apology, and a complete reversal of my professional reputation, all because I'd spent 3 weeks learning to run. But something about the conversation bothered me. It felt too easy, too convenient. One good performance and suddenly 3 years of condescension was forgotten? One race and now I was management material? Jessica must have seen something in my expression when I sat down at my desk. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Garrett just offered me a promotion. That's amazing. Congratulations. Her enthusiasm was genuine, but then she paused. Wait, why do you look like that's bad news? It's not bad news. It's just weird timing. Because of the race? Exactly because of the race. 3 days ago he was making jokes about me tripping over myself. Today I'm management material. It doesn't feel right. Jessica was quiet for a moment, then leaned closer to my cubicle. Can I tell you something? Something I've noticed about Garrett? I nodded. He's a followers. He doesn't lead, he reacts. When everyone thought you were the clumsy guy who couldn't handle basic tasks, he amplified that. Now that everyone saw you dominate that race, he's swinging the other direction. She paused. The question is, which version of you is real? Which version was real? That was the question that stayed with me for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. As the days passed, I noticed more changes in how people treated me. Not just colleagues, but everyone. The barista at the coffee shop downstairs started remembering my order. The security guard in the lobby made actual conversation instead of just nodding. Even my dry cleaner, a man who'd been professionally indifferent to me for 2 years, asked about my weekend plans. It was like winning that race had given me some kind of social credential I'd never possessed before. People saw me as competent, confident, capable. The problem was I wasn't sure I felt any different inside. Thursday afternoon I was leaving work when I ran into Michael Patterson in the lobby. He was carrying a gym bag and looked like he was heading out for a run. Ben, how's the recovery going? Legs feeling okay after Saturday? Good, thanks. Actually, I've been thinking about starting a more structured training program. Saturday made me realize I might have more potential than I thought. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. He grinned. Listen, I run with a group on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. We're not super competitive, just people who enjoy pushing each other to get better. You should join us sometime. I'd like that. What kind of pace do you guys run? We do different workouts, but our easy runs are usually around 7:30 to 8-minute miles. Your race pace on Saturday was about 7:50, so you'd fit right in. 7:50 per mile. I'd never thought about my pace in those terms, but hearing it described that way made Saturday's performance seem even more significant. I wasn't just a beginner who'd gotten lucky, I was actually running at a pace that experienced runners considered respectable. Next Tuesday? I asked. Perfect. We meet at Green Lake at 6 p.m. Look for the group by the bathhouse. We're usually the ones complaining about our previous workout. That weekend I found myself back at Green Lake, but this time it felt different. Instead of the nervous uncertainty of my early training runs, I felt like I belonged here. The path that had once seemed impossibly long now felt manageable, familiar. I ran an easy 5 miles, my longest distance ever, and it felt good. Not just physically good but mentally good. Each step was a reminder that I was capable of things I'd never imagined. But it was on Sunday, during what was supposed to be a rest day, that everything changed again. I was grocery shopping at the QFC near my apartment when I heard a familiar voice from the next aisle over. Garrett's voice, loud and animated, the way it got when he'd had a few drinks. I'm telling you, Mark, it was the funniest thing you've ever seen. Poor Ben Thompson trying to keep up with actual athletes. I thought he was going to collapse right there on the track. I froze, a box of cereal halfway to my cart. Wait, came another voice I recognized as Mark Henderson from HR. Didn't Ben place third? I thought he did really well. Third place. Garrett's laugh was sharp and dismissive. Out of 25 people, half of whom had never run more than a block in their lives. It's like being the tallest kid in elementary school. Impressive until you realize the competition. My hands clenched around the shopping cart handle. But you seemed pretty complimentary at work this week, Henderson said. Didn't you offer him that analyst promotion? Of course I did. You have to manage people's egos, Mark. Ben's been feeling pretty good about himself since Saturday, and a confident employee is a productive employee. But let's be realistic here. Garrett's voice took on the condescending tone I knew so well. One decent showing in a company fun run doesn't change 3 years of mediocrity. The guy still can't present to clients without stumbling over his words. Still needs help with basic Excel functions. Still trips over his own feet half the time. So the promotion? Will probably go to someone more qualified. But Ben doesn't need to know that right now. Let him think he's earned something. Keep him motivated for a few more months. I stood there in the cereal aisle, listening to my boss explain to a colleague how he was manipulating me, how my moment of genuine achievement was being reduced to a participation trophy, how nothing had really changed despite everything I'd accomplished. The conversation continued, but I'd stopped listening. Instead, I was thinking about Jessica's question. Which version of me was real? Maybe it was time to find out. Tuesday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes Seattle runners grateful to live in the Pacific Northwest. I arrived at Green Lake 15 minutes early, nervous about meeting Michael's running group but determined to push myself into new territory. The group turned out to be 6 people, ranging in age from late 20s to early 50s. They were clearly experienced runners but not intimidatingly serious about it. More importantly, they welcomed me without any of the awkwardness I'd been expecting. "So you're the corporate athlete Michael's been telling us about," said a woman named Amanda who looked like she could probably run a marathon without breaking a sweat. "3rd place in your first race? That's impressive." "Thanks. I'm still pretty new to all this." "We're doing tempo intervals tonight," Michael explained. 4 miles total, with 3 one-mile intervals at about 7:20 pace, with half-mile recovery jogs between them. 7:20 pace. That was 30 seconds faster per mile than my race pace on Saturday. 30 seconds might not sound like much, but in running terms, it was significant. "I'm not sure I can hold 7:20 for a full mile," I admitted. "Only one way to find out," said Michael. "If you blow up, you blow up. But I've got a feeling you're tougher than you think." The first interval was a revelation. Running with a group, matching the pace of experienced runners, I found myself capable of speeds I'd never attempted. 7:20 per mile felt challenging but sustainable, and when Michael called out Mile 1, 7:18, I realized I'd not only hit the target pace, I'd exceeded it slightly. The recovery jog felt almost easy by comparison, and the second interval felt even stronger than the first. I was starting to understand what people meant when they talked about running with others pushing you to new levels. It was during the third interval that something clicked. Maybe it was the rhythm of running with the group, maybe it was the confidence building from the first 2 intervals, but suddenly 7:20 pace felt comfortable. More than comfortable, it felt like a pace I could maintain for much longer than a mile. 7:15 for that last one, Michael announced as we cooled down. "Ben, you've got some serious natural speed. Have you ever thought about racing competitively?" "Competitively?" "Local 5K and 10K races. There's a pretty active scene around Seattle. With some structured training, you could probably be competitive in your age group within a few months." Competitive in my age group. 6 months ago, I couldn't run for 60 seconds without stopping. Now, experienced runners were talking about me being competitive in actual races. That night, I researched local running races. Seattle had dozens of them, ranging from small neighborhood 5 Burmese chots to major events like the Seattle Marathon. I found myself bookmarking several upcoming races, imagining what it would feel like to line up not as a corporate team-building participant, but as a real runner. The next morning at work, I walked past Garrett's office with a different energy than usual. I wasn't angry about what I'd overheard at the grocery store. Instead, I felt something much more powerful: clarity. I knew exactly who I was and exactly what I was capable of. Around 10 a.m., Garrett called me into his office. "Ben, I've got some great news. The analyst position we discussed? I've been talking to upper management, and they're very interested in your candidacy. We should have the formal interview process started within the next week or 2. "That's great to hear," I said and meant it. Not because I wanted the promotion he was probably never planning to give me, but because I wanted to see how far he'd take this charade. "I have to say, Ben, Saturday really opened my eyes to your potential. I think this is going to be the start of something big for you here at Morrison Financial." "I hope so. I've been thinking about potential a lot lately." Good. That's exactly the kind of mindset we need more of around here." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mr. Garrett, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you think my actual chances are of getting that analyst position?" Something flickered across his face. "Well, Ben, these things are never guaranteed. There's always competition, internal and external candidates. But I think you've got a real shot." "I see. And if I don't get it?" "Then we'll find other opportunities for you to grow. I'm committed to your development here, Ben. Saturday proved you're capable of more than any of us realized." I nodded slowly. "Thanks for the honesty." That evening, I signed up for my first real race, the Emerald City 5K, scheduled for 3 weeks from Saturday. It wasn't a corporate team-building event or a charity fun run. It was a competitive race with entry fees, official timing, and age group awards. I also did something else I'd never done before. I scheduled a meeting with HR to discuss my career development options, independent of any promises Garrett might or might not be making. Because I was starting to realize that the most important race wasn't the one I'd already won. It was the one I was about to run. The 3 weeks leading up to the Emerald City 5K passed in a blur of training, work, and a growing sense that my life was changing in ways I was only beginning to understand. Michael's running group had adopted me as their newest project, and under their guidance, my improvement was dramatic and consistent. Tuesday and Thursday evenings at Green Lake became the highlights of my week. The group pushed me through workouts I never would have attempted on my own. Mile repeats at paces I'd thought were impossible, tempo runs that taught me the difference between running fast and running efficiently, and long runs that built both my endurance and my confidence. "Your improvement curve is pretty remarkable," Amanda observed after a particularly strong workout where I'd completed 4 800-meter intervals at 6:50 pace. "Most people plateau after their first few months of training. You're still dropping time every week." "Maybe I had more room for improvement," I said, which got a laugh from the group. "Or maybe," said Michael, "you're finally running at the level your body was always capable of and you just never knew it." At work, the dynamic with Garrett had settled into an uncomfortable routine. He continued to be publicly supportive, praising my work performance and hinting broadly about upcoming opportunities. But I'd started paying closer attention to the details, and what I saw wasn't encouraging. The analyst position he'd mentioned? When I checked with HR, they had no record of any such opening being created. The projects he assigned me were still the same routine tasks I'd been doing for 3 years. And in meetings, while he no longer made jokes at my expense, he also didn't treat me as someone whose opinion carried any real weight. It was during a department meeting 2 weeks before the race that things came to a head. We were discussing the quarterly client review process, and I'd identified what I thought was a significant inefficiency in how we were analyzing portfolio performance data. It was the kind of insight that came from actually doing the detailed analytical work, rather than just managing it from a distance. "That's an interesting observation, Ben," Garrett said when I finished explaining my suggestion. "But I think you might be missing some of the bigger picture considerations here. This is the kind of strategic thinking that comes with experience." He then proceeded to dismiss my suggestion and move on to the next agenda item. But Jessica, who'd been paying attention, stayed after the meeting. "You know that idea you just presented?" she said quietly. "I ran some numbers on it during lunch yesterday. You're right. Your approach would save the department about 15 hours a week of redundant analysis." Then why did Garrett shut it down so quickly? Because admitting you're right would mean admitting he's been doing it wrong for 3 years. And because, she paused, looking around to make sure we weren't overheard, I don't think he actually understands the technical aspects of what we do well enough to recognize a good idea when he hears one. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I went over Garrett's head. I scheduled a meeting with Patricia Coleman, the regional director who oversaw our entire division. I'd interacted with her maybe 3 times in 3 years, and never about anything more significant than quarterly reviews. "Ben Thompson," she said when I arrived at her office Friday afternoon, "I have to say, you've become quite the topic of conversation around here lately. I hope that's a good thing. Depends on your perspective. Richard Garrett speaks very highly of your recent evolution. Says you're showing real leadership potential." She gestured for me to sit. "But I've also heard some interesting things from other sources. Jessica Martinez speaks very highly of your analytical work. Says you've been identifying process improvements that could significantly impact our efficiency." I realized that Jessica had been having her own conversations with upper management. "I've noticed some areas where we might be able to streamline our approach," I said carefully. "Show me." For the next 30 minutes, I walked Patricia through the analysis I'd tried to present in Garrett's meeting. Not just the specific efficiency improvement, but a broader examination of how our department's processes compared to industry best practices. When I finished, Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "This is good work, Ben. Really good work. The kind of strategic analysis we need more of." She leaned back in her chair. "Can I ask you something? Why are you bringing this to me instead of working through Richard?" I tried to present it to Mr. Garrett, but he felt it wasn't ready for implementation. "I see." Something in her tone suggested she understood more than she was saying. "Ben, I'm going to be direct with you. Your performance over the past few months has been exceptional. Not just the corporate athletics thing, though that certainly got people's attention. Your work quality, your initiative, your analytical insights. You're operating at a level that suggests you're ready for significantly more responsibility. I appreciate that feedback. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" That evening, I met the running group for what had become our traditional pre-race workout. A short, fast session designed to keep our legs sharp without inducing fatigue. Just 3 miles with a few 400-meter intervals at race pace. "So tomorrow's the big day," Michael said as we cooled down. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous. Excited. ready to find out what I'm really capable of. That's the perfect attitude. But remember, this isn't just about time or placement. This is about proving to yourself that you belong in real competition. Amanda nodded in agreement. Your first real race is always special. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already accomplished something most people never attempt. Any predictions on time? Asked Kevin, one of the other group members. Based on training, he should be able to break 22 minutes, Michael said. Maybe significantly. Breaking 22 minutes would put me under the course record from the Corporate Athletics Day. 6 months ago, such a possibility would have seemed absurd. Now it felt like a reasonable goal. That night, I laid out my racing gear with the same precision I'd used for Corporate Athletics Day, but everything was different now. Better shoes, moisture-wicking racing shorts, a lightweight shirt that actually fit properly. More importantly, I was different. The nervous, uncertain person who'd struggled through that first 60-second jogging interval was gone, replaced by someone who belonged at the starting line of a competitive race. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect racing weather. The Emerald City 5K was held at Discovery Park, a challenging course with rolling hills that would test both fitness and tactical awareness. As I arrived and picked up my race number, I was struck by the difference in atmosphere compared to Corporate Athletics Day. These were real runners. People with years of training, sophisticated equipment, and the lean, efficient builds that come from serious dedication to the sport. I looked around at my competition and felt a moment of doubt. These weren't office workers playing at athletics for a day. These were people who had devoted significant portions of their lives to getting faster. Ben? Michael's voice cut through my growing nervousness. There you are. How are you feeling? Like I might be in over my head. Perfect. That means you're taking it seriously. He looked around at the other runners warming up. Listen, don't be intimidated by the field. Half these people are going to go out too fast and blow up in the 3rd mile. You know how to pace yourself and you know how to finish strong. Trust your training. As we lined up for the start, I positioned myself based on my goal time rather than my confidence level. The under 2200 hours section of the starting area, surrounded by runners who looked like they'd been doing this for years. The race director's voice came over the loudspeaker. Runners, this is a challenging course with significant elevation changes. The first mile is mostly uphill, the second mile has rolling hills, and the final mile is mostly downhill back to the finish. Pace accordingly. I'd studied the course profile, so this wasn't news, but it was a reminder that this race would require more tactical awareness than the flat corporate course. Runners to the line. As I moved forward with the crowd, I felt that familiar pre-race energy but magnified tenfold. This wasn't just about personal achievement anymore. This was about proving I belonged in real competition. Sat. The silence before a race start is unlike anything else in sports. Hundreds of people, all focused on the same singular moment, all about to find out what months or years of training had prepared them for. Go. The start was more controlled than I'd expected. These experienced runners understood pace management in a way the corporate athletes hadn't. Instead of the chaotic sprint start I'd experienced before, this field settled into organized groups based on ability level within the first few hundred meters. I found myself in a pack of maybe 8 runners, all targeting similar times. The first mile was indeed mostly uphill, a steady climb that tested patience as much as fitness. I focused on maintaining even effort rather than even pace, letting my speed naturally decrease on the uphills while maintaining the same level of exertion. Mile 1, 7 minutes, 38 seconds. That was exactly where I wanted to be. The uphill had slowed everyone down, but I felt controlled and ready for what was coming next. The second mile was where the race really began. The rolling hills created natural opportunities for moves and counter-moves, and I started to understand what experienced racers meant when they talked about tactical running. I moved up from 8th to 6th position during the second mile, not through any dramatic surge, but by running more efficiently than the people around me. While they fought the hills, I flowed over them, maintaining steady effort and letting my improved fitness carry me forward. Mile 2, 14 minutes, 51 seconds. 7:13 for that second mile, despite the challenging terrain. I was running faster than I'd ever run in training, but it felt sustainable. More importantly, I could see the leaders ahead of me and they didn't look unreachable. The final mile was where everything I'd learned over the past few months came together. The course dropped back toward sea level, and I knew this was where my finishing kick would matter most. I passed 5th place on a long downhill section, running with a controlled aggression I'd never experienced before. Then 4th place on a slight uphill that separated the truly fit from the merely fast. With half a mile to go, I was in 3rd place and could see the 2 leaders ahead of me. That's when I made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. I decided to race for the win. The final quarter mile was where I discovered what I was truly capable of. Not just physically but mentally. Not just in terms of speed but in terms of will. I caught the second-place runner with about 200 meters to go, and I could see the leader struggling slightly ahead of me. With 100 meters left, I was running faster than I'd ever run in my life, but it felt controlled, inevitable. The leader heard me coming and tried to respond, but I could tell he was at his limit while I still had another gear. I took the lead with 50 meters to go and opened up a gap that made it clear the race was over. As I crossed the finish line, arms raised in disbelief, the volunteer announced my time. 20 minutes and 37 seconds, good for first place overall. First place overall. In a field of 347 runners. With a time that was nearly 2 minutes faster than my corporate race just 2 months earlier. As I walked through the finish area trying to process what had just happened, Michael appeared beside me with a huge grin. 20:37. In your first competitive race. That's not just good, Ben. That's exceptional. The awards ceremony 20 minutes later felt surreal. Standing on the top step of a podium, receiving a trophy for winning an actual competitive race, listening to applause from runners who had devoted years to the sport I'd only discovered months earlier. But the most meaningful moment came when I checked my phone after the ceremony. There was a text from Jessica. Saw the race results online. Holy cow. You won. Can't wait to hear everything Monday. And there was a text from Patricia Coleman. Congratulations on your race victory. When you're ready to discuss your career development, my door is open. I think it's time for some changes around here. As I drove home that afternoon, trophy sitting on my passenger seat, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, I'd been the guy everyone expected to trip over himself. Today, I was a race winner, someone who had discovered capabilities I'd never known existed. Monday morning, I walked into the Morrison Financial Group offices with the confidence of someone who had proven themselves in the most objective arena possible. Head-to-head competition against people who had trained for years to be as fast as they could be. Garrett was waiting for me at my cubicle, holding a printout of the race results. Ben. I saw the race results online. First place. That's incredible. Thanks. It was a good day. A good day? Ben, you won. Against real competition. His enthusiasm seemed genuine, but I could hear the undertone of surprise. Even after everything that had happened, he still hadn't expected me to be capable of real excellence. I've been training pretty seriously. Clearly. Listen, Ben, I think this changes some things around here. This kind of achievement, this demonstrates the kind of excellence we want associated with our department. I think it's time to accelerate some of those opportunities we've been discussing. Before I could respond, Patricia Coleman appeared beside us. Ben, congratulations on Saturday. Quite an achievement. She turned to Garrett. Richard, I need to speak with both of you. My office, 10 minutes. As we walked to Patricia's office, I realized that this meeting was going to determine more than just my immediate future at Morrison Financial. This was going to determine what kind of person I was going to be, and what kind of life I was going to build. In Patricia's office, she got straight to the point. Ben, based on your recent performance, both athletic and professional, I'm creating a new senior analyst position. Significantly increased responsibility, substantial salary increase, and direct reporting to me rather than through departmental management. I'd like you to consider it. I looked at Garrett, whose face had gone through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been panic. Patricia, Garrett interjected, I think there might be some confusion here. Ben is certainly showing promise, but senior analyst might be moving a bit fast. Perhaps we should consider a more gradual progression? Patricia's expression was polite but firm. Richard, I've reviewed Ben's analytical work from the past 6 months. It's consistently excellent, often identifying insights that more experienced team members have missed. Combined with his demonstrated ability to set ambitious goals and achieve them, I think he's ready for significantly more responsibility. She turned back to me. The position comes with a 40% salary increase and equity participation in the firm. You'd be working directly on our highest-level client accounts, with autonomy to implement the process improvements you've identified. 40% salary increase. Direct reporting to the regional director. Responsibility for major client accounts. Everything I'd been working toward for 3 years, offered not because of politics or office relationships, but because I'd proven I could set ambitious goals and exceed them. I'm very interested, I said. Excellent. We'll need to handle the transition carefully, of course. Richard, I'll need you to work with Ben on transferring his current responsibilities and identifying which of his insights can be implemented more broadly across the department. After the meeting, as we walked back toward our department, Garrett was uncharacteristically quiet. Ben, he finally said, I owe you another apology. A bigger one this time. I waited. I underestimated you. Not just your athletic ability but your professional capabilities. I let my assumptions about who you were prevent me from seeing who you actually are. He paused outside his office. For what it's worth, I'm glad Patricia saw what I missed. You've earned this opportunity. That afternoon, I cleaned out my cubicle and moved my belongings to my new office. An actual office, with a window overlooking Elliott Bay, where I'd be developing analytical strategies for the firm's most important clients. As I sat in my new chair looking out at the Seattle skyline, I thought about the question Jessica had asked months earlier. Which version of me was real? The answer I realized was both. The uncertain, underestimated person I'd been was real. And the confident, capable person I'd become was also real. The difference wasn't in changing who I was fundamentally, but in discovering what I'd always been capable of when given the opportunity to prove myself. That evening, I met the running group for our usual workout. But instead of our normal routine, Michael had planned something special. A celebration run around Green Lake, the place where my transformation had really begun. So, Amanda said as we settled into an easy pace, what's next? Boston Marathon? Olympic trials? I was thinking more like learning to enjoy running without constantly needing to prove something to myself. That's probably healthy, Michael laughed. Though I have to say 20 minutes and 37 seconds suggests you've got more speed in you if you want to find it. As we ran together in the Seattle evening, I realized that the most important race I'd ever run wasn't the corporate athletics day, or even the Emerald City 5K. It was the 3-week journey from that first 60-second interval to discovering I was capable of things I'd never imagined. Sometimes the finish line isn't about beating other people. Sometimes it's about running fast enough to catch up with the person you were always meant to be. 6 months later, I was promoted to Director of Analytics. A year later, I qualified for the Boston Marathon. 2 years later, I started my own consulting firm, helping other companies optimize their analytical processes. But the most important thing I learned wasn't about running or career advancement, or proving people wrong about my capabilities. I learned that the moment you stop accepting other people's limitations as your own limitations, everything becomes possible. And sometimes, it only takes 3 weeks of running to discover that the person you thought you were and the person you actually are can be completely different. The guy who used to trip over power cords? He's still in there somewhere. But now he's also the guy who wins races, builds successful businesses, and most importantly, never lets anyone else define what he's capable of achieving. All it took was learning to run fast enough to catch up with my own potential.